Hey, Billy Drain here, and today we're in Tulsa, Oklahoma with our good friends at DP Winch. I have Jeremy Robinson here with us. We're going to cover some more of those winch maintenance things that you may come across. Today what we want to talk about is if our winch doesn't go into free spool and some things to check. First, on the wrecker side, you want to make sure that you have power to the switch, and then that switch is driving air to the winch. Jeremy's going to go over some things that we want to look for once we make sure that we have air going to that winch and that we can address and maybe rebuild and address in the field if possible.
Hey, thanks, Billy. So the three things we want to check when we're looking at a kick-out cover that's not functioning properly is we verified the air source. It's actually coming, on this winch, it's coming out of the vent, so we know we have a problem in the cylinder area. Three things we want to look at: a cut O-ring, porosity in the casting, or corrosion on the piston. Before getting started, it's always a great idea to have the copy of your owner's manual for your winch. If you need a copy, please contact our service department with the model and serial number of your winch. We'll be happy to send you one. As always, before getting started on a work job, make sure you got your proper PPE. We got safety glasses, we got steel toes, and we've got some work gloves. So let's get started. All right, we're at the winch. We're going to get started on this repair. The first thing we're going to do is drain the oil out of the winch. We're going to do that by removing the fill plug. And then the drain plug down here at the bottom, we'll use a 3/8 inch Allen wrench. We want to make sure that we've got absorbent pads down, something to collect the oil in.
So Jeremy, one thing to keep in mind is this can actually be done on the truck itself, so we don't have to remove the winch. One little trick is that we can use the opposite side outrigger and run it down so we can tilt that winch up and get a little more of that oil out and make just the cleanup a little bit easier.
That's a good tip. When you're disposing of your winch oil, always follow local, state, and federal guidelines. Okay, next we're going to remove the end cover by taking off the end cover bolts. It's a 9/16 socket. You can use an impact, you can use a ratchet, you can use a wrench. All right, now that we've got the cover removed, we're going to remove this thrust plate. You can just pull that out by hand and set it aside. Next, we're going to take the cover over to an arbor press. We're going to press down the coupling gear, compress the spring, and expose the retaining ring to take this assembly apart. Now that we have the unit disassembled, we're going to take it back over to our workbench so we can identify the problem. All right, we're back at the bench with the end cover assembly disassembled. Now we're going to look to see if we can figure out what's going on with it, whether it's a cut O-ring, corrosion in the piston bore, or porosity or pitting in the casting. All right, we visually inspected the parts. We found a cut O-ring. We've removed that O-ring. Now we're going to replace it with a new one. When replacing one O-ring, it's best to go ahead and replace all the O-rings. Now that we've replaced the O-ring on the piston, we're also going to replace the O-ring on the housing. It may be helpful to use a pick tool to get the old O-ring off the cover. Now that we've got the new O-rings installed, we'll take the parts back over to the press to reassemble. Okay, now we're going to reinstall. So we've replaced our spring, we put our piston assembly back in, we've got our retaining ring that we're going to carefully position over the hole so it doesn't go down when we use the arbor press to compress the spring again. We're depressing the spring to expose the retaining ring groove. You may need to use a hammer and a flat-headed screwdriver on the sleeve to tap it down to expose the groove. Be careful not to damage the O-rings with a screwdriver or allow the retaining ring to get smashed into the cylinder when you're installing it. Once the groove is exposed, replace the retaining ring. And once that's installed, we can release the spring tension off of the arbor press. Now that we've got the cover put back together, we're going to apply air to the air kick-out port and test our repair job. Now we're going to reinstall the thrust washer. We'll use a little bit of grease to hold it in place. Now we're ready to put the gearing cover back on the winch. All right, so when you're reinstalling the winch cover, you're going to align the input shaft teeth with the internal spline of the coupling. Once you've installed the cover, make sure that your breather hole is pointed to the top position. When you're putting your bolts in, if you've lost a bolt or damaged a bolt, you'll want to replace that with the proper part. That spec's listed in your owner's manual. When you're retightening your bolts, it's always good to go in a star crisscross pattern. Be careful not to over tighten them. We want to save room to torque them to the proper spec. That spec's listed in your owner's manual. Now it's time to reinstall the drain plug. It's the plug with the magnet on it. The location for the plug hole is at the bottom of the gear end cover. All right, now it's time to refill the winch with oil. On the 25,000-pound winch, we're going to use an HD32 synthetic gear lube. The mobile SHC 624 is an equivalent gear lube that you can find locally. Now we're going to fill it up with oil. Remember, the proper level for gear oil is at the bottom of the threads. Now that we've got oil to the proper level at the bottom of the threads, we'll reinstall our fill plug. We'll wipe up any remaining oil on the cover. That completes the gear end cover O-ring replacement. Now it's time to hook back up your airlines and function test the winch.
Jeremy, thank you for sharing that with us. If you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to anyone in Miller Customer Service or the Customer Service Department at TWG.
All right, thanks for having me.
Make sure you subscribe to our news feed to stay up to date with all the latest tips and tricks from Miller Industries.
Miller Industries, the world leader in towing and recovery equipment.
This video is for product demonstration purposes only and is not intended for training or instructional purposes. Situations vary, and operators should rely on their own professional knowledge and safety procedures when conducting actual recoveries.